The atmospheric processor on mining station Omega-7 had been acting strange for weeks. Chief Engineer Kala Voss pressed her six-fingered hand against the cool metal wall and felt the subtle vibrations that shouldn't have been there. Her crystalline skin caught the amber light from the corridor, casting fractured rainbows on the opposite wall as she frowned at the readings on her tablet. "The pressure differential is off by 0.03%, she muttered to herself, her voice carrying the musical undertones typical of her species, the Resonari. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you." Such a small deviation would be meaningless to most engineers, but Kala had spent 30 years maintaining atmospheric systems across the Galactic Mining Consortium's operations. She knew when something was wrong. Station Commander Chen Patel emerged from the central lift, his boots clicking against the metal flooring. Unlike Kala's ethereal appearance, Chen was built like a boulder, broad shoulders, thick limbs, and gray skin that looked like it had been carved from stone. His species, the Terrans of Kepler-442b, were known for their practicality and unshakable calm. "Still having issues with the weather system?" Chen asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "It's not the weather system," Kala replied, her frustration evident in the way her skin's luminescence flickered. "The atmospheric processor is reading micro-changes in pressure that our meteorological equipment isn't detecting. It's like there's something affecting the air composition that we can't identify." Chen pulled up his own readings on a handheld device. Omega-7 was a small research and mining outpost orbiting the gas giant Tempest Prime. The station's primary function was extracting rare atmospheric gases from the planet below, but it also served as a weather monitoring facility for the entire system. The work was important but routine, at least it had been until 3 weeks ago. "Could be interference from the solar flares," Chen suggested. Navigation Officer Torres reported unusual electromagnetic activity in the sector. Before Kala could respond, the station's communication system crackled to life. "All senior staff to Laboratory 7 immediately," came the voice of Dr. Sarah Kim, the station's chief xenoarchaeologist. There was an urgency in her tone that made both engineers exchange worried glances. Laboratory 7 was located in the deepest section of the station, where the heavy shielding protected sensitive archaeological equipment from cosmic radiation. As Kala and Chen made their way through the narrow corridors, they passed other crew members hurrying in the same direction. The station only housed 43 beings from 6 different species, so when Dr. Kim called for all senior staff, it meant something significant had happened. The laboratory doors slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a scene that made everyone stop in their tracks. In the center of the room stood a large cylindrical container, roughly 8 feet tall and 3 feet in diameter. It was made of a dark metallic material that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and strange symbols were etched into its surface in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Dr. Kim stood beside the container, her usually pristine lab coat stained with dirt and what looked like ice crystals. Her human features were tense with excitement and concern. Beside her, Security Chief Marcus Webb, a tall, lean man with the enhanced reflexes of a military-grade cybernetic implant, kept his hand resting on his sidearm. "Where did this come from?" Chen asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "The mining drones found it this morning," Dr. Kim explained, her scientific excitement battling with obvious apprehension. "It was buried under 300 meters of ice on Tempest Prime's largest moon. The preservation is extraordinary. Based on preliminary scans, this container is approximately 800 years old." Navigation Officer Maria Torres, a small woman with the pointed ears and silver hair of the Lunari species, stepped closer to examine the symbols. "I've never seen writing like this. It's not in any of the databases maintained by the Galactic Archive. That's because it's pre-Federation," Dr. Kim said quietly. "This predates the formation of our alliance by at least 2 centuries. But here's what's really interesting. The container is still powered. After 800 years in deep freeze, whatever's inside is still active." The room fell silent, except for the low hum of the station's life support systems. The Galactic Federation had been formed 750 years ago when 6 species discovered each other through faster-than-light travel and decided to work together for mutual benefit. Before that, each species had developed independently, and records from those times were sparse and often contradictory. "What's inside?" asked Dr. Elena Vasquez, the station's chief medical officer. Her reptilian features showed the careful concern of someone trained to preserve life in all its forms. Dr. Kim activated a holographic display that showed the results of their scans. The image that appeared made everyone in the room gasp. Inside the container, suspended in some kind of preservation fluid, was a humanoid figure. It was roughly the same size and shape as Dr. Kim, but there were subtle differences. The bone structure was slightly different, the muscle density appeared higher, and there were what looked like technological implants integrated directly into the nervous system. "It's human," Dr. Kim said, though her voice carried uncertainty, "but not exactly like any human in our records. The genetic markers are consistent with baseline humanity, but there are modifications. Extensive modifications." "Impossible," Security Chief Webb said flatly. "Humans didn't have that kind of biotechnology 800 years ago. Hell, they barely had space travel." Dr. Kim nodded slowly. "That's what makes this so fascinating. According to our historical records, humans 800 years ago were just beginning to establish their first interstellar colonies. They were technologically advanced, but nowhere near the level required for this kind of genetic enhancement." Chief Engineer Kala studied the readings more carefully, her crystalline features reflecting the holographic light in mesmerizing patterns. "The power source is unlike anything in our current technology. It's not fusion, not antimatter, not even quantum zero-point energy. It's something else entirely." "Could it be dangerous?" Commander Chen asked, his practical nature asserting itself. "All the scans indicate the being inside is in some kind of suspended animation," Dr. Kim replied. "Vital signs are minimal but stable. Brain activity is present but extremely low level. It's like they're in the deepest possible sleep." Dr. Vasquez moved closer to the display, her medical training evident in the way she examined the data. "The preservation technology is incredible. There's no cellular degradation, no ice crystal formation in the tissues. Whatever process was used, it's far beyond our current medical capabilities." Navigation Officer Torres had been quietly studying the symbols on the container's surface. "Dr. Kim, some of these markings look almost like mathematical equations. See this pattern here?" She pointed to a series of interconnected shapes that seemed to flow into each other. "It's similar to the atmospheric modeling equations we use for weather prediction, but far more complex." "Weather prediction?" Chen asked. "Why would a preservation chamber have weather equations on it?" Before anyone could answer, the station's atmospheric monitoring system began chiming softly. Kala immediately pulled out her tablet and frowned at the readings. "The pressure differential just corrected itself," she said, confusion evident in her voice. "For the first time in 3 weeks, all the atmospheric readings are perfectly normal." Dr. Kim looked from Kala's tablet to the preservation chamber and back again. "When did the atmospheric irregularities start?" "About 3 weeks ago," Kala replied, "right around the time the mining drones started their deep excavation on the moon. The implications hung in the air like a dense fog. The chamber had been found that morning, but the mining operation had been going on for weeks. If the atmospheric changes were connected to the discovery of this ancient human, then the being inside might somehow be affecting their environment even while unconscious." "We need to wake it up," Dr. Kim said quietly. The words hit the room like a physical blow. Security Chief Webb's hand tightened on his weapon. "Absolutely not. We have no idea what that thing is capable of. For all we know, it could be some kind of weapon." "It's not a weapon," Dr. Kim said with the confidence of someone who had spent years studying ancient civilizations. "Look at the preservation chamber's design. This isn't military technology. It's scientific, medical. Someone went to enormous trouble to keep this person alive for a very specific purpose." Dr. Vasquez nodded slowly. "The medical scans support that theory. The modifications to the subject's biology aren't weapons-grade enhancements. They appear to be designed for data processing and environmental sensitivity. If I had to guess, I'd say this person was some kind of researcher or scientist." "Or a weatherman," Torres added quietly. When everyone looked at her, she pointed again to the symbols on the chamber. "I've been analyzing these equations while we've been talking. They're not just atmospheric models. They're predictive algorithms for complex weather systems. Incredibly sophisticated ones. Commander Chen considered this information carefully. As the senior officer on the station, the decision ultimately fell to him. What are the risks of revival? Dr. Kim consulted her scanner again. The preservation system appears to have built-in revival protocols. The process looks automated and safe. But... She hesitated. But what? But once we start the revival process, we can't stop it. And we have no way of knowing what this person will be like when they wake up. The modifications to their biology suggest they might have capabilities we don't understand. The room fell silent again as everyone considered the implications. They were a small research station, far from any major Federation worlds. If something went wrong, help was weeks away at best. It was Navigation Officer Torres who broke the silence. "The atmospheric disturbances have been getting worse," she said quietly. "Yesterday, our weather prediction models failed completely. We couldn't forecast conditions more than 6 hours in advance. If this continues, it could affect mining operations throughout the entire system. And if this person is somehow connected to those disturbances." Drive, preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. "Now back to the story," Vasquez added. "Then they might be the only one who can help us understand what's happening." Chen looked around the room at his senior staff. Each face showed a mixture of curiosity, excitement, and fear. They were scientists and explorers, people who had dedicated their lives to understanding the unknown. But they were also responsible for the safety of everyone on the station. "Dr. Kim," he said finally, "what's your professional assessment? As our chief xenoarchaeologist, what do you think we're dealing with?" Dr. Kim took a deep breath before responding. "Based on everything I've seen, I believe we found a time capsule. Someone 800 years ago had technology far beyond what we thought possible for that era, and they used it to preserve this person for a specific purpose. The weather-related symbols on the chamber suggest that purpose might be connected to atmospheric science or meteorology." "You think they're a scientist?" "I think there's something more than that," Dr. Kim replied. "The level of biological modification, the advanced preservation technology, the sophisticated mathematical models. This person was designed to do something that required capabilities beyond normal human limits." Security Chief Webb stepped forward. "Even if that's true, we're talking about someone from 800 years ago. Their science, their society, their entire way of thinking would be completely alien to us. How do we know they won't see us as threats? How do we know they won't try to take over the station?" Dr. Vasquez consulted her medical readings again. "The biological modifications are extensive, but they don't appear to include any kind of combat enhancements. No increased muscle density, no hardened bone structure, no enhanced reflexes. If anything, the changes seem designed to make the person more sensitive to environmental conditions, not more dangerous." "More sensitive how?" Chen asked. "Enhanced nervous system conductivity, increased brain processing power focused on pattern recognition, modified sensory organs that can detect minute changes in atmospheric pressure, humidity, electromagnetic fields." Dr. Vasquez paused, studying the data more carefully. "It's like someone took a human being and turned them into a living atmospheric sensor." The pieces were beginning to fit together in a way that both fascinated and terrified the assembled scientists. Whoever was in that chamber had been transformed into something that could sense and process environmental data in ways that normal beings couldn't comprehend. "There's something else," Dr. Kim added quietly. "The preservation chamber isn't just keeping this person alive, it's been monitoring our station's atmospheric systems. I found data threads connecting the chamber to our environmental sensors. It's been watching us." The revelation sent a chill through the room. Security Chief Webb drew his weapon partially from its holster. "You're saying this thing has been spying on us?" "Not spying," Dr. Kim corrected. "Monitoring. Like it's been checking to see if conditions are right for something. And 3 weeks ago, when the atmospheric disturbances started, the monitoring activity increased significantly." Navigation Officer Torres looked up from her own scanner with wide eyes. "Dr. Kim, I'm detecting a power surge in the preservation chamber. The revival protocols are activating on their own." Everyone turned to look at the dark cylinder. Sure enough, lights were beginning to appear along its surface, following the patterns of the strange symbols. The low hum that had been barely audible was growing stronger, and the preservation fluid inside was beginning to circulate more rapidly. "Can we stop it?" Chen asked. Dr. Kim's fingers flew over her controls as she tried to interface with the chamber's systems. I don't think so. The revival sequence appears to be automatic. It's like the chamber was programmed to wake up its occupant when certain conditions were met. What conditions? Webb demanded. I don't know, Dr. Kim admitted. But whatever they were, we've apparently met them. The lights on the chamber grew brighter, and the symbols began to pulse in complex rhythms. The preservation fluid was draining away, and through the transparent section of the chamber, they could see the figure inside beginning to move slightly. Everyone step back, Commander Chen ordered. Dr. Vasquez, prepare your medical equipment. Security Chief Webb, keep your weapon ready but don't aim it directly at the chamber. Dr. Kim, keep monitoring the revival process. As the station's senior staff watched in fascination and growing anxiety, 800 years of preserved sleep came to an end. The preservation chamber opened with a soft hiss of escaping gas, and the figure inside took their first breath of air in almost a millennium. The being that emerged from the chamber looked remarkably like Dr. Kim and the other humans on the station, but there were subtle differences that became more apparent as they moved. Their movements were fluid and precise, as if they were constantly aware of every air current and pressure change in the room. Their eyes, when they opened, seemed to take in not just what they could see, but what they could sense about the environment around them. Where am I? The revived person asked, their voice carrying a slight echo as if they were speaking from inside a vast space. Dr. Kim stepped forward carefully. You're on Mining Station Omega-7, orbiting the gas giant Tempest Prime. My name is Dr. Sarah Kim. Can you tell us your name? The person from the preservation chamber looked around the room, taking in the faces of the various species represented among the station's crew. Their expression showed surprise but not fear. My name is David Chen, they said, and something in the way they spoke made it clear that this was not the same kind of human as Dr. Kim. I'm a meteorological engineer for the Terran Colonial Weather Service. Terran Colonial Weather Service? Dr. Kim repeated. I'm not familiar with that organization. David's expression grew confused. What year is it? According to the Galactic Federation calendar, it's year 2847. The color drained from David's face. That's 815 years after I entered the preservation chamber. You've been asleep for over 8 centuries, Commander Chen said gently. The galaxy has changed significantly since your time. David nodded slowly, as if processing information at a speed that was almost visible. The Federation. You said Galactic Federation. How many species are members? 6, Dr. Kim replied. Humans, Resonari, Terrans, Lunari, Saurians, and Crystallines. Humans are still, humans haven't. David struggled with his words. Haven't what? Dr. Vasquez asked with professional concern. I was told that by the time I woke up, humanity would have either evolved beyond recognition or destroyed itself completely. David's eyes focused on Dr. Kim with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. You look exactly like the humans from my time. Navigation Officer Torres stepped forward. Mr. Chen, can you tell us why you were preserved? What was the purpose of your 800-year sleep? David was quiet for a long moment, and during that silence, everyone in the room could feel something changing in the air around them. The atmospheric sensors on their tablets began showing readings that fluctuated wildly, then suddenly stabilized at levels more precise than any of them had ever seen. I was preserved, David said slowly, because someone detected something coming. Something that would disrupt weather patterns across the entire galaxy. My job was to wake up when the disruption began and help people understand what was happening. What kind of disruption? Chen asked. David closed his eyes and seemed to be listening to something none of them could hear. When he opened them again, his expression was grave. The kind that comes from outside our galaxy. The kind that changes the fundamental properties of space itself. Before anyone could ask what he meant, the station's emergency alarms began blaring. Navigation Officer Torres ran to the nearest communication terminal, and her face went pale as she read the incoming data. Commander, she said, her voice barely audible over the alarms, we're receiving distress signals from 17 different systems. They're all reporting the same thing. Complete failure of all weather prediction models and atmospheric control systems. David nodded grimly. It's starting. Whatever sent me that signal 800 years ago, it's finally arrived. The room erupted in questions and demands for explanations, but David held up his hand for silence. The gesture was so commanding that even Security Chief Webb found himself lowering his weapon. "I need to understand what's been happening to your atmospheric systems over the past few weeks," David said. "Every detail, every anomaly, every reading that didn't make sense. Because if I'm right about what's coming, those irregularities are just the beginning." Chief Engineer Kala stepped forward with her tablet full of atmospheric data. "We've been experiencing micro-variations in pressure and humidity that our equipment couldn't explain. Small changes, but consistent across all our monitoring stations." David studied the data for perhaps 30 seconds before handing the tablet back. "These aren't random variations. They're resonance patterns. Something is testing your atmospheric control systems, learning how they work." "Testing them for what?" "Doctor," Kim asked. David's expression grew even more serious. "To see how to take them over." The implications of his words sank in slowly. If something could take control of atmospheric systems across the galaxy, it could potentially make entire worlds uninhabitable. It would be a form of warfare that no one had ever imagined. "Mr. Chen," Commander Chen said formally, "I think we need to hear everything you know about why you were preserved and what you think is happening to our galaxy." David nodded and gestured toward the chairs arranged around the laboratory's central table. "You might want to sit down. What I'm about to tell you is going to change everything you think you know about the history of human space exploration." As the station's senior staff settled into their seats, David remained standing. The atmospheric sensors around the room continued to show readings that were more stable and precise than any of them had ever seen, as if David's mere presence was somehow calibrating their equipment. 815 years ago, David began, humanity was not the peaceful, cooperative species that became part of your Galactic Federation. We were expansionist, competitive, and constantly fighting each other for resources and territory. But we were also incredibly advanced in certain areas of technology. He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts or perhaps listening to atmospheric conditions that only he could detect. The Terran Colonial Weather Service was created because early human colonies kept failing due to unpredictable weather patterns. Traditional meteorology wasn't enough. We needed people who could sense atmospheric changes at levels that normal instruments couldn't detect. So we began modifying volunteers. "Modifying them how?" Dr. Vasquez asked with professional interest. "Enhanced nervous systems, modified sensory organs, increased brain processing power, focused specifically on pattern recognition in complex atmospheric systems." David gestured to himself. "We became living weather stations capable of predicting atmospheric conditions weeks or even months in advance." "That's impossible," Chief Engineer Kala said. "Weather systems are chaotic. The computational requirements for long-term prediction would be enormous." David smiled, and for the first time since his revival, he looked almost human in the way the crew understood the term. "Not if you don't think of weather as chaotic. What if weather patterns are actually part of larger, more complex systems that most people just can't perceive?" Before anyone could respond to this, David's expression suddenly changed. His eyes unfocused and his head tilted slightly, as if he were listening to something. "We need to evacuate the station," he said urgently. "Right now." "What? Why?" Commander Chen demanded. "Because in approximately 14 minutes, a pressure wave is going to hit this system that will destroy any artificial structure not specifically designed to withstand it." Security Chief Webb stood up abruptly. "How could you possibly know that?" David was already moving toward the laboratory's communication console. "Because I can feel the atmospheric disturbances building across multiple systems. The wavefront is moving faster than light, which should be impossible. But it's happening anyway." He began working the communication controls with a familiarity that seemed impossible for someone who had been asleep for 8 centuries. Within moments, he had established connections with 17 different Federation outposts and colonies. "This is David Chen of the Terran Colonial Weather Service to all Federation stations in the Tempest Prime sector. You have less than 15 minutes to implement emergency atmospheric protocols. Shut down all weather control systems and switch to passive monitoring only. Any active atmospheric manipulation will be used against you." The responses came back immediately, and they were not encouraging. Most of the stations reported that their weather control systems were already malfunctioning, or had been destroyed by the atmospheric anomalies. "It's too late for most of them," David said grimly. "But we might be able to save Omega-7 if we act quickly." Commander Chen took charge of the situation with the decisive authority that had made him an effective leader. "All hands, this is the commander. Begin emergency evacuation procedures immediately." This is not a drill. As the station's crew began the complex process of shutting down mining operations and preparing for potential evacuation, David worked with Chief Engineer Kala to modify the station's atmospheric control systems. "What are we doing?" Kala asked as David guided her through a series of modifications that seemed to contradict everything she knew about atmospheric engineering. "We're making the station invisible to whatever is coming," David explained. "Instead of actively controlling our atmosphere, we're going to let it fluctuate naturally while monitoring everything passively. The incoming force can only take control of systems that are actively manipulating atmospheric conditions." "That doesn't make any sense," Kala protested. "How can something take control of our weather systems?" David paused in his work to look at her directly. "Because the force that's coming isn't from our universe. It's from a place where the rules of physics work differently. In their reality, consciousness and matter are more closely connected. They can literally think atmospheric systems into doing what they want." The idea was so alien that Kala found herself struggling to understand it. If they can control matter with their thoughts, why haven't they already taken over everything? "Because they need to understand how our systems work first," David replied. "That's what the past few weeks of atmospheric disturbances have been about. They've been learning how our technology functions so they can subvert it." As David and Kala worked to modify Omega-7 systems, the rest of the crew prepared for the possibility that they might need to abandon the station entirely. Dr. Kim carefully packed her most important research data, while Dr. Vasquez prepared medical supplies that could sustain the crew during an emergency evacuation. Navigation Officer Torres monitored long-range sensors and reported increasing atmospheric disturbances throughout the sector. "David, I'm showing massive pressure waves building in 17 different systems. How did you know this was going to happen?" David didn't look up from his work on the atmospheric controls. Because 800 years ago, someone detected the early signs of this invasion. They knew it was coming, but they also knew that by the time it arrived, the technology and knowledge needed to fight it might no longer exist. "So they preserved you," Dr. Kim said, understanding beginning to dawn on her face. "They preserved me and others like me," David confirmed. "Weather engineers who could detect and predict atmospheric phenomena that normal instruments couldn't measure. We were scattered across the galaxy in hidden preservation chambers, programmed to wake up when the invasion began." Security Chief Webb had been listening to this conversation while coordinating the station's defense preparations. "Others like you? How many others?" "I don't know," David admitted. "The preservation network was designed so that none of us would know the locations of the other chambers. But if the plan worked, there should be enhanced weather engineers waking up on worlds throughout the galaxy right now." The thought that this crisis might be happening on hundreds or thousands of worlds simultaneously was sobering. If David was right, then what they were experiencing on Omega-7 was just a small part of something much larger and more dangerous. "Pressure wave incoming," Torres announced, her voice tight with tension. "Impact in 3 minutes." David finished his modifications to the atmospheric systems and stepped back. "That's the best I can do with the time we have. Everyone needs to get to the station's central core and activate emergency life support." As the crew moved quickly through the station's corridors toward the reinforced central section, David remained calm in a way that was both reassuring and unsettling. He moved through the station as if he could feel every air current and pressure change, adjusting his path to avoid areas where the atmospheric conditions were becoming unstable. "David," Dr. Kim called as they reached the central core. "What exactly is going to happen when this pressure wave hits?" David sealed the core's atmospheric barriers and activated the emergency life support systems before answering. "If I'm right, the wave will attempt to take control of any active atmospheric manipulation systems it encounters. Stations that resist will be destroyed. Stations that submit will be converted into something else." "Converted into what?" "Atmospheric processing centers for an invasion force that doesn't breathe the same kind of air we do." The implications of his words were still sinking in when the pressure wave hit Omega-7. The The station shuddered as forces beyond anything the crew had experienced before washed over them. The lights flickered, artificial gravity fluctuated, and every piece of electronic equipment on the station registered readings that shouldn't have been possible. But instead of being destroyed, Omega-7 rode through the wave like a ship sailing through a storm. David's modifications to the atmospheric systems had worked. By making the station's environmental controls passive rather than active, they had become invisible to whatever force was attempting to take control of atmospheric systems throughout the sector. "Status report," Commander Chen called as the station stabilized. "All primary systems functional," Chief Engineer Kala reported, amazement evident in her voice. "Atmospheric controls are operating within normal parameters. Life support is stable." Navigation Officer Torres checked her long-range sensors, and her expression grew grim. "Commander, I'm reading complete loss of signal from 14 of the 17 stations that were reporting atmospheric disturbances. The 3 that are still transmitting are reporting total system failures." David nodded grimly. They tried to fight it with their existing technology. That's exactly what this force was counting on. "What do we do now?" Dr. Vasquez asked. David moved to the station's primary communication console and began establishing connections with Federation worlds throughout the galaxy. "Now we find out how many of my fellow weather engineers successfully woke up, and we start coordinating a defense that this invading force won't be expecting." As David worked to establish contact with other preservation sites, the crew of Omega-7 began to understand that they had become part of something much larger than a simple mining operation. They were now participants in a conflict that had been planned 8 centuries in advance, fighting an enemy that could manipulate the very air they breathed. The question was whether David and others like him could provide the knowledge and capabilities needed to save not just their station, but the entire galaxy. The communication array crackled with static as David established contact with the first preservation site. His enhanced hearing could detect subtle variations in the signal that normal equipment would miss, allowing him to cut through interference that would have made communication impossible for anyone else. "Preservation Site Delta 9 responding," came a voice through the speakers. The accent was unfamiliar, suggesting the speaker had been preserved from a different era or region than David. "This is Rebecca Walsh, agricultural weather specialist. I've been awake for 6 hours." David's expression showed relief, mixed with grim determination. "Rebecca, this is David Chen at Mining Station Omega-7. What's your situation?" "The farming colony I'm on has lost 3 atmospheric processors to some kind of takeover event. The remaining systems are holding, but barely. I've got local administrators demanding explanations I can't give them." Before David could respond, another voice joined the communication channel. "This is Michael Torres from Preservation Site Gamma 12, Industrial Weather Coordinator. My host station is reporting similar takeover attempts across their entire system." Within an hour, David had established contact with 7 other preserved weather engineers scattered across Federation space. Each reported the same pattern: atmospheric control systems being targeted and converted by an unseen force, while their own enhanced abilities allowed them to detect and counter the invasion in ways that normal technology couldn't match. Commander Chen watched David coordinate this network of specialists with growing amazement. The man who had awakened from 8 centuries of sleep was demonstrating capabilities that went far beyond weather prediction. He was organizing a galactic defense network in real time, processing information from multiple star systems simultaneously, and making tactical decisions with a speed and accuracy that rivaled the most advanced military computers. "David," Commander Chen said during a brief pause in the communications, "I need to understand what we're really dealing with here. You keep referring to this as an invasion, but an invasion by what?" David turned from the communication console, and for a moment his enhanced senses seemed to be processing atmospheric data from across the station. "The entities attempting to take control of our systems exist primarily as patterns of organized electromagnetic energy. In their native environment, matter and consciousness are more closely integrated than they are in our universe." Dr. Kim stepped forward with her archaeological expertise evident in her questions. "Are you saying they're some kind of energy beings?" "More accurately, they're beings that evolved in a region of space where the physical laws governing matter and energy interaction are different from ours," David explained. "They can interface directly with electronic systems and manipulate matter at the quantum level through focused thought patterns." Security Chief Webb had been listening with growing concern. "If they can control matter with their minds, why do they need to take over our atmospheric systems? Why not just reshape our entire atmosphere directly?" David's expression grew thoughtful. Because direct matter manipulation requires enormous energy expenditure. It's much more efficient for them to take control of existing systems and use those systems to reshape atmospheric conditions to match their needs. Chief Engineer Kala studied the atmospheric readings that continued to pour in from across the sector. What kind of atmospheric conditions do they need? Based on the conversion patterns I'm seeing, David replied after consulting data from multiple sources, they need a specific mixture of ionized gases and electromagnetic fields that don't occur naturally in most inhabited systems. They're essentially trying to turn our worlds into extensions of their native environment. The implications were staggering. If successful, this invasion wouldn't just conquer Federation worlds. It would make them uninhabitable for any carbon-based life forms. Navigation Officer Torres had been monitoring long-range communications and turned to address the group with urgency in her voice. David, I'm receiving distress calls from Federation Command. They're requesting immediate assistance from any available specialists in atmospheric warfare. David nodded grimly. Patch me through to whoever's in charge of the defense coordination. The main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of a massive Federation battleship. The figure that appeared was Admiral Sarah Chen, a human with the bearing of someone accustomed to making life-and-death decisions under pressure. Her resemblance to Commander Chen was strong enough that several crew members looked between the two with curiosity. This is Admiral Chen of the Federation Defense Force. Who am I speaking with? Admiral, this is David Chen, Terran Colonial Weather Service. I am coordinating a network of specialists who were specifically prepared to counter this type of invasion. Admiral Chen's eyebrows rose slightly. Terran Colonial Weather Service was disbanded over 700 years ago. Yes, ma'am. I've been in preservation since then, programmed to wake up when this invasion began. The Admiral studied David through the view screen, with the careful attention of someone evaluating a potential asset. Mr. Chen, we've lost contact with over 400 atmospheric control stations across Federation space. Our best scientists can't explain how our systems are being compromised. Can you? David gestured to the atmospheric data flowing across his console. The invading entities are using quantum-level manipulation to interface directly with your control systems. Traditional defensive measures won't work because they're not attacking your systems. They're convincing your systems to work for them instead. Convincing them how? By creating localized fields where consciousness and matter interact more directly than normal physics allows. Within those fields, the entities can literally program matter to behave according to their will rather than according to standard physical laws. Admiral Chen's expression showed the frustration of a military commander facing an enemy that operated outside all known tactical parameters. How do we fight something like that? By using people who can operate in the same way they do, David replied. The weather engineers from the Preservation Network have been modified to interface directly with atmospheric systems through enhanced sensory capabilities and quantum-level consciousness manipulation. Before the Admiral could respond, alarms began sounding on her bridge. She turned to address someone off-screen, then looked back at David with increased urgency. Mr. Chen, we just lost the atmospheric processors for New Geneva. That's a colony world with over 2 million inhabitants. How quickly can you get there? David consulted readings from multiple sources, his enhanced mind processing vast amounts of data in seconds. I can't get there quickly enough to save the existing processors, but if you can provide transport, I can help establish new atmospheric control systems that will be resistant to takeover. What kind of transport do you need? Something fast enough to reach New Geneva within 12 hours, with the capability to carry atmospheric engineering equipment. Admiral Chen nodded decisively. I'm dispatching the courier vessel Rapid Response to your location. It'll be there in 90 minutes. As the communication ended, David turned to address the crew of Omega-7. I need to leave the station to help coordinate the broader defense effort, but I want some of you to come with me. Commander Chen stepped forward. Why? Because the entities we're fighting learn from every encounter. They're adapting to the capabilities of individual weather engineers. I need people who can think differently, who can approach atmospheric problems from perspectives they won't expect. Dr. Kim's scientific curiosity overcame her caution. What exactly would we be doing? Helping me establish atmospheric control systems that work on principles the invaders haven't encountered before. David explained. Your expertise in xenoarchaeology could be crucial for understanding how different species approach environmental control. Chief Kala's engineering background, combined with her species' natural resonance abilities, might allow us to create hybrid systems that operate on multiple physical principles simultaneously. The idea was fascinating and terrifying in equal measure. David was proposing that they join a galactic conflict using experimental technology against an enemy that could manipulate reality itself. Security Chief Webb voiced the concern that everyone was thinking. What about the safety of the station? If we leave, who's going to protect Omega-7 if these entities return? David checked his atmospheric readings again. The modifications we made to the station's systems should keep it invisible to the invaders as long as the crew maintains passive monitoring protocols. But to be completely safe, you should shut down all mining operations and maintain minimal power signatures until this crisis is resolved. Navigation Officer Torres looked up from her sensor readings with surprise. David, I'm detecting 3 more preservation chambers activating in this sector. It looks like your awakening triggered some kind of automated revival sequence. David's expression showed satisfaction mixed with concern. That's part of the fail-safe protocol. When one weather engineer activates their full capabilities, nearby preservation sites receive activation signals. We're designed to work in coordinated groups. Within 2 hours, the courier vessel Rapid Response arrived at Omega-7. It was a sleek, fast ship designed for emergency missions, with advanced atmospheric processing equipment and communication arrays that could maintain contact across vast distances. David, Dr. Kim, Chief Engineer Kala, and Dr. Vasquez transferred to the courier, along with carefully selected equipment from the mining station. As they departed, David remained in constant communication with other weather engineers across the galaxy, coordinating what was becoming the most complex atmospheric defense operation in recorded history. During the journey to New Geneva, David worked with his new team to develop defensive strategies that combined Federation technology with the enhanced capabilities of the preserved weather engineers. Dr. Kim's archaeological knowledge proved invaluable for understanding how ancient civilizations had dealt with atmospheric crises, while Kala's engineering expertise helped adapt those historical solutions to current technology. The key insight, David explained as they worked, is that the invaders expect us to fight them using purely technological solutions. They've learned to counter Federation atmospheric control systems because those systems operate according to predictable scientific principles. Dr. Vasquez looked up from her analysis of the biological modifications in David's nervous system. But your capabilities don't operate according to normal scientific principles. They operate according to expanded scientific principles, David corrected. The modifications I received allow me to interact with quantum-level atmospheric phenomena that normal instruments can't detect. I can sense patterns and make predictions that would require massive computational power for anyone else. Kala worked at a portable engineering station, designing hybrid atmospheric processors that combined Federation technology with resonance principles from her own species. If I understand correctly, you're proposing that we create systems that operate on multiple scientific frameworks simultaneously? Exactly. The invaders can take control of systems that operate according to a single set of physical laws, but they'll have much more difficulty with systems that operate according to multiple, sometimes contradictory, physical principles at the same time. As the Rapid Response approached New Geneva, the scale of the crisis became apparent. The planet's atmosphere was in chaos, with massive storm systems forming and dissipating in patterns that violated every known principle of meteorology. The few atmospheric processors still functioning were operating at maximum capacity, just to maintain breathable air in small pockets around the major population centers. This is worse than I expected, David said as he studied the planetary atmospheric data. The invaders aren't just taking control of the processors, they're using them to actively reshape the entire planetary atmosphere. Dr. Kim analyzed the patterns of atmospheric disruption and found something that chilled her to the bone. David, these storm formations, they're not random. They're following geometric patterns that match some of the most ancient symbols in my archaeological databases. What kind of symbols? Symbols associated with civilizations that disappeared without explanation. Civilizations that built massive atmospheric engineering projects and then vanished completely. The implication was clear. The entities they were fighting had done this before. to other civilizations, perhaps across multiple galaxies. The Federation was not facing an isolated invasion. They were facing something that had been consuming advanced civilizations for eons. How many civilizations? David asked quietly. Dr. Kim consulted her databases with growing horror. Based on the pattern matches I'm seeing, possibly hundreds, maybe thousands. All of them advanced enough to build sophisticated atmospheric control systems. David closed his eyes and seemed to be listening to atmospheric conditions across multiple star systems. When he opened them again, his expression was grim but determined. Then we need to make sure we're the first civilization that fights back successfully. As the rapid response entered New Geneva's atmosphere, David coordinated with atmospheric control stations across the planet to implement the new hybrid defensive systems. The work was incredibly complex, requiring precise timing and coordination between multiple teams working under emergency conditions. But as the new systems came online, something unprecedented began to happen. The chaotic storm patterns that had been consuming the planet's atmosphere began to stabilize. The geometric formations that had appeared in the weather system started to break apart and dissipate. "It's working," Dr. Vasquez reported from her monitoring station. "The hybrid systems are maintaining atmospheric stability in ways the invaders can't counter." David nodded, but his expression remained serious. "This is just the beginning. We've proven that defense is possible, but now we need to go on the offensive." "Offensive?" Kala asked. "How do you attack entities made of organized energy?" David smiled for the first time since awakening from preservation, and there was something in that smile that suggested capabilities far beyond what he had revealed so far. "By using our atmospheric systems to create conditions that are as hostile to them as their environment would be to us. If they can reshape our atmosphere to match their needs, then we can reshape it to become their worst nightmare." As New Geneva's atmosphere stabilized and millions of lives were saved from atmospheric collapse, David began coordinating the next phase of the defense. But unknown to the crew of the Rapid Response, this successful defense had attracted the attention of something far more dangerous than the energy entities they had been fighting. Deep in the space between galaxies, ancient intelligences that had been dormant for millennia began to stir. The atmospheric war that David thought he was winning was about to become something much larger and more terrifying than anyone could have imagined. The dimensional rift opened above New Geneva like a wound in reality itself. David felt it before any instruments detected it. A massive distortion in atmospheric pressure that spoke of something far beyond the energy entities they had been fighting. "All stations, this is David Chen. We have a Code 7 situation developing. Something much larger is coming through." Admiral Chen's voice crackled through the emergency channels. "David, our deep space sensors are picking up massive gravitational anomalies throughout the sector." "What are we looking at?" David's enhanced senses were processing atmospheric data from across multiple star systems, and what he discovered made his modified nervous system surge with alarm. "Admiral, the energy entities we've been fighting, they weren't invaders. They were scouts." Through the rift emerged something that defied conventional understanding. It wasn't a ship or a creature, but rather a living atmospheric system the size of a small moon. Swirling clouds of ionized gas formed complex patterns that pulsed with intelligence, while electromagnetic discharges created neural networks spanning thousands of kilometers. Dr. Kim stared at her xenoarchaeological scanners in disbelief. "David, this thing matches descriptions from the oldest records in my database. Civilizations called them the storm shepherds, atmospheric predators that consume entire planetary weather systems." The storm shepherd descended toward New Geneva, and as it approached, the planet's carefully stabilized atmosphere began responding to its presence. The hybrid defensive systems that had worked perfectly against the energy scouts were being overwhelmed by something operating on a completely different scale. "All Federation forces, fall back to minimum safe distance," Admiral Chen ordered. "Weapons are ineffective against this target." But David wasn't retreating. Instead, he closed his eyes and reached out with consciousness capabilities he had never fully tested. His awareness expanded beyond the Rapid Response, beyond New Geneva, connecting with every weather engineer across the galaxy through quantum entanglement networks that had been dormant for 8 centuries. "Rebecca, Michael, all of you, I need you to link with me now. We're going to do something that was never supposed to be possible." Across Federation space, 17 enhanced weather engineers synchronized their consciousness into a single unified network. Their combined awareness encompassed atmospheric conditions on hundreds of worlds simultaneously, processing data at scales that no individual mind could comprehend. The Storm Shepherd paused in its descent as it encountered something it had never faced before, a distributed consciousness that could match its own atmospheric manipulation capabilities. For the first time in its existence, spanning millions of years, it faced prey that could fight back on equal terms. David opened his eyes, and they now glowed with energy that reflected the combined power of the entire weather engineer network. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that resonated through the ship's atmospheric systems. "Dr. Vasquez, I need you to monitor my vital signs. What I'm about to do will push these modifications beyond their design limits. David, your neural activity is already showing patterns I've never seen in any species," Dr. Vasquez replied with medical concern. "If you push much further, you could cause permanent damage. The damage will be permanent for millions of beings if I don't try." David placed his hands on the ship's atmospheric control interface and began a process that transformed the very nature of the local space-time continuum. Using the combined power of 17 enhanced minds, he started reshaping the quantum fields that governed matter-energy interaction throughout the system. The Storm Shepherd found itself in an environment where its fundamental abilities no longer functioned as expected. The laws of physics that allowed it to manipulate matter through conscious intent were being rewritten in real time by a distributed intelligence that operated on principles it couldn't comprehend. Chief Engineer Kala watched her instruments register readings that violated everything she knew about atmospheric engineering. "David, what are you doing to local space?" "I'm creating a reality zone where consciousness and matter interact according to our rules instead of theirs," David replied, his voice now carrying the harmonics of 17 different neural patterns. Within this zone, atmospheric systems respond to cooperative intention rather than dominance. The concept was revolutionary. Instead of trying to overpower the Storm Shepherd, David was changing the fundamental nature of reality to make cooperation more effective than conquest. The Storm Shepherd, encountering this unprecedented situation, made a choice that surprised everyone. Instead of continuing its attack, it began communicating through atmospheric pressure waves that carried complex information patterns. Dr. Kim's translation equipment worked frantically to decode the signals. "It's trying to establish communication protocols. David, I think it wants to negotiate." The atmospheric conversation that followed occurred at levels that normal beings could barely perceive. "David, speaking for the Unified Weather Engineer Network, established communication with an intelligence that had consumed atmospheric systems across multiple galaxies for millions of years. What emerged from this dialogue changed everything the Federation thought they knew about the universe. The Storm Shepherds were not malevolent predators. They were refugees. Their original galaxy had been consumed by something even more dangerous, and they had been wandering through space for eons, consuming atmospheric systems because they needed the specific energy patterns those systems produced to survive. "They're dying," David explained to the assembled Federation forces. "Their species requires the complex electromagnetic patterns generated by intelligent atmospheric manipulation, but they've never encountered a civilization that could provide those patterns through cooperation rather than consumption." Admiral Chen's response was cautious. "Are you suggesting we should help them?" "I'm suggesting we should evolve beyond the need for conflict entirely," David replied. The Weather Engineer Network can generate the energy patterns they need without destroying existing atmospheric systems. In exchange, they can teach us atmospheric manipulation techniques that will allow us to terraform uninhabitable worlds and survive in environments we never thought possible. The negotiation process was unlike anything in recorded history. 17 enhanced humans served as intermediaries between a galactic federation and an ancient intelligence that existed as a living storm system. The agreement they reached transformed both civilizations. The Storm Shepherds would establish symbiotic relationships with Federation worlds, providing advanced atmospheric engineering capabilities in exchange for the energy patterns generated by conscious cooperation and weather modification. The weather engineers would serve as permanent liaisons, using their enhanced abilities to facilitate communication and coordination. But the most remarkable outcome was what happened to David and his fellow weather engineers. The process of creating quantum reality zones where consciousness and matter interacted more directly had permanently altered their capabilities. They were no longer simply enhanced humans. They had become something entirely new. The modifications were just the beginning, David explained to Dr. Vasquez as she performed final medical scans. The real enhancement was learning to synchronize consciousness across interstellar distances. We've become a distributed intelligence that can operate on galactic scales. 6 months later, David stood on the observation deck of Atmospheric Research Station Alpha, watching as Storm Shepherds worked with Federation engineers to terraform a previously uninhabitable world. The cooperation between biological and atmospheric intelligences had produced advances in environmental engineering that neither species could have achieved alone. Dr. Kim approached with a report that contained discoveries that would reshape galactic civilization. David, our archaeological teams have found evidence of weather engineer preservation networks in 17 different galaxies. The system that preserved you and the others, it wasn't built by ancient humans. David nodded, unsurprised by the revelation. It was built by a previous civilization that faced the same choice we did. They chose cooperation over conflict and evolved beyond the need for physical existence. The Weather Engineer program was their gift to future civilizations that would face similar challenges. The implications were staggering. The galaxy was part of a vast network of civilizations that had learned to transcend their physical limitations through conscious cooperation with forces they had initially seen as threats. What happens now? Dr. Kim asked. David smiled as atmospheric data from thousands of worlds flowed through his enhanced consciousness. Now we help the next civilization that faces this choice. The preservation networks are already building new chambers, preparing weather engineers for challenges we can't yet imagine. Commander Chen, who had chosen to join the Atmospheric Research Project, looked out at the Storm Shepherds working in perfect harmony with Federation engineers. You're saying this will happen again? The universe is full of intelligences that exist in forms we've never imagined, David replied. Storm Shepherds, energy entities, consciousness networks, they're all part of a larger ecosystem of intelligence that spans multiple galaxies. We've just learned to become part of that ecosystem instead of fighting against it. The transformation was complete. David Chen, who had awakened as the last relic of an extinct weather service, had become the first member of a new form of distributed intelligence that could bridge the gap between biological and atmospheric consciousness. The weather engineers continued their work across the galaxy, not as humans with enhanced abilities, but as something entirely new, living interfaces between different forms of intelligence that allowed cooperation to flourish where conflict had once seemed inevitable. And in hidden chambers scattered across unexplored regions of space, new preservation systems activated, preparing the next generation of weather engineers for challenges that lay beyond the current understanding of any known civilization. The age of atmospheric warfare had ended. The age of atmospheric cooperation had begun. And David Chen, no longer entirely human but not quite something else, served as proof that evolution's greatest leaps came not from conflict, but from learning to dance with forces too vast to fight. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.